Hey, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm okay.
Just okay?
Just okay. My keyboard just fell down, but I've recovered.
Okay, that's more of a problem for your keyboard than for you, probably.
I think we both recovered.
Okay. We should do some self-promotion. There was this nice Business Week piece about us, which I meant to mention last time we were together.
By John Fine.
That's right. Their media columnist. And
he was
one
very
thing
nice.
I learned, which wasn't totally clear to me when I first saw it, was that it was not just on businessweek.com, but in the actual physical, tangible, corporeal version of Business Week. So McGraw-Hill made the judgment that we were worth killing a few trees for, and I'm feeling kind of uplifted by that.
I think we should hang it up, and I think that's
the acme of...
now I
we've seen the mountaintop. We've been to the mountaintop.
Yeah, that's as good as it gets. An actual physical thing.
Or...
We've been in the New York Times, you've been in Business Week, what more is there?
Or we could exploit it. We could use some of the blurbs from it. He called us weirdly compelling.
Right.
He said we were strenuously devoted to eggheadedness. Which
that's like my friend Ellen once divided men into 6 types, and I was a harmless weirdo.
We could use that too.
That was my type. So
we could use that too. We should put blurbs up, and that could be one of them. Harmless weirdos.
The weirdness theme seems to run throughout assessments of things. But anyway.
Well, anyway, once it's been a Business Week, I'll just kind of wait for the venture capital money to roll in any moment now.
I think you got to ask for the business, Bob.
You got to ask for the business or for the capital?
Ask for the capital.
Bring it on. If there are any venture capitalists out there.
You're asking now.
I'm asking now.
Okay.
Email it. We will accept PayPal but at some point.
I don't think that's how it works.
Huh. Maybe there's something I don't understand.
I think you have to give up some control, maybe.
Oh. And do you need a business model or something?
No, don't worry about that.
Okay.
That's...
You know, the other development in Blogging Heads awareness, or awareness of Blogging Heads, is this website you directed my attention to that seems to be, assuming it's still in action, which I think it is, devoted to Blogging Heads TV, to wry commentary, sometimes cutting commentary on Blogging Heads TV.
It's actually pretty funny.
There are moments of disturbing cleverness, yes.
They mocked my attempt to eat a bagel. And I should say, I was following the advice of an actor friend of mine who said you should make it more realistic by eating a bagel. And I was hungry, so I ate a bagel. I didn't realize how ugly it looks eating a bagel on TV. Maybe if you're an actor, there's a way to eat while maintaining some decorum.
Well, when they freeze the frame, a lot of things look ugly.
It was pretty ugly in real time, too. It won't happen again.
I wasn't going to say anything, but...
Let's put it that way. It won't happen again.
Okay.
All right.
But anyway, I don't know. Does that person have hostile intent? Can you tell?
Oh no.
No. A fan.
He attacks because he loves.
Okay. Well, good. We'll link to both of those, and then we will begin now discussing actual events.
Yes. The big political news is the Lamont-Lieberman race in Connecticut. There's a primary in early August. Joe Lieberman, pro-war Democrat, a sanctimonious pro-war Democrat, is being challenged by Ned Lamont, who is I believe, the grandson of Corliss Lamont, a famous pacifist, and one of the big libraries at Harvard is named after him. Anyway, he's a rich, waspy anti-war candidate, and he's been gaining on Lieberman, so much so that Lieberman has taken out papers to run as an independent just in case he loses the primary, which seems a real possibility, showing further weakness, which makes it more likely he'll lose the primary. Anyway, there's a big debate on the left of why exactly are they picking on poor Joe Lieberman. And it seems perfectly reasonable to me to say we're picking on him because he's for the war and we're against the war.
Well, but aren't there other Democrats that they're not picking on who are for the war and are similarly unapologetic for support for the war per se? In other words, they would claim that the problem was execution?
Well, first, so they're making an example of this one guy, right? You're allowed to do that. Second, they haven't quite been as sanctimonious as Lieberman. I mean, Lieberman wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying, we have to stand behind the president, and basically saying that people who opposed the president were undermining national security.
So I don't think question his credibility, or something like that.
I don't think Dianne Feinstein has gone quite that far.
No.
There was a purge, Connecticut's a very democratic state. If the liberals in Connecticut want to get rid of Lieberman because he supports the war, he says, well, we agree on everything except the war. Well, the war's a big thing. You're allowed to vote somebody out of office because of a big mistake like voting for the Iraq War and supporting it. And I don't see why you should hold Coase to a standard of consistency. Well, if you oppose Lieberman, you have to oppose everybody. He's allowed to marshal his resources. But the Coase people are the ones who insist it's not all about the war. That's the problem. They're all saying, oh, no, it's because Lieberman, he's not critical enough of Bush, or he's triangulates too much, or he's not. Ezra Klein wrote, basically saying it's tribal. He's not partisan enough. It's sort of red team versus blue team, and he's not sufficiently loyal to the blue team.
Well, that seems valid to me too.
That doesn't seem valid to me too, because this gets back to my point of first, triangulation is sometimes good. Second, what do the Coase people stand for, aside from a thuggish enforcement of partisan loyalty? What is it that the party stands for? If you look at the closest thing that Coase has to a platform, which is his statement about libertarian Democrats, he doesn't talk about, opposing globalization or trade. He's against gun control. So Coase is a triangulator, okay? So what's he doing attacking other triangulators? Plus, Lieberman is a pathetic triangulator. He wimps out at the first whiff of buckshot. You remember at the convention, he says, please preserve affirmative action. So he's not such a big offender, and Coase himself is an offender.
Okay,
So
okay, but you're not criticizing people who abandon Lieberman on grounds of his lack of tribalism, but people who do it and do not themselves have an ideological definition of proper tribalism. That's your critique of Coase, right? Is that their tribalism is almost arbitrary. It's so lacking in ideological content.
Yes. Well, it actually has ideological content, but it's hypocritical ideological content. It's basically, purity is what we say it is, and it's sort of a... It seems to come down to A, tribalism, as Klein says, and B, a sort of Grover Norquist-like power grab, as Jonathan Chait accuses him of doing. But there's not, but yes, you could have a principled, ideologically driven purity test that Lieberman failed on issues other than Iraq, but, it's pretty implausible.
Well, I don't know. I kind of think there's two issues being conflated, but maybe I'm the only one conflating them. I mean, it just seems to me that, look, saying you're a Democrat has to have some meaning. And among the meanings are that you will have a tendency to stand by Democrats and not undermine them. You won't criticize Republicans for everything they say, but on balance, there will, your party ID per se will lead to a certain allegiance, for Democrats, and he has been known to undermine Democrats.
Maybe I'm a 60s guy, but it seems to me the ideal Democratic politics is you say what you think. And if that means you say nice things about Republicans sometimes, that's okay. His voting record is heavily, heavily, heavily Democratic.
Okay, but if that is the definition, if that's a criterion of being a Democrat with a big D, he fails and should be expelled from the party on those grounds.
Well, but I reject that idea of partisanship. That's the whole issue. Coase has this idea of partisanship, which is you defend other Democrats even if they're wrong. That somehow, although I doubt he meets his own standard. And my idea is you say what's right, and that eventually that will lead you to supporting Democrats more often than Republicans. I reject partisanship per se as the shining light that should guide us in terms of who we oppose and who we support.
Now, it seems to me there's some minimal level of allegiance to the party per se that you should be expected to maintain, and it's not clear to me he has. But for my own purposes, what sticks in my craw completely and utterly is the statement you alluded to, where he says Democrats will undermine the credibility of our commander-in-chief at the peril of our nation. In other words, saying it's unpatriotic. Democrats, even if they believe that Bush has misled the nation, they shouldn't say that because that would undermine his credibility. That makes me sick. That's not Democrat with a small d. It's not Democrat with a big D. And on the grounds of that statement alone, I say throw him to the sharks.
Well, I say throw him to the sharks on the basis of Iraq alone, even without that statement. That's the Matt Iglesias point. The Matt Iglesias point is Iraq is enough.
Well, Steve Clemens made the same point in in his blog, but it does seem to me, for purposes of consistency, they're going to have to either argue for abandoning some other pro-Iraq war and similarly unapologetic Democrats, or point to what's special about his support for the Iraq war.
Well, you know, he has this theory that you could be more conservative in a red state than a blue state. He has basically, you know, a very pragmatic, almost sort of popular fronty view, which is in blue states we want to enforce purity, and that's what's going on in Connecticut. In red states, you're allowed to be for the war and we'll tolerate it. That does leave Dianne Feinstein, who is a blue state person who supported the war, and John Kerry. And why aren't they picking on them? Because Kerry's reneged, and you know, Feinstein probably for pragmatic reasons you support. But yes, Lieberman is sanctimonious. Was what he wrote in the op-ed horribly offensive? You know, I mean, you don't want to encourage a rapid pullout from Iraq. I think even if you think those who voted for the war should be punished. I mean, the liberal position now, it seems to me, is shifting to a don't pull out position, because if we leave, there's going to be a bloodbath. It's the whole idea that if we leave, it'll remove the threat and the Iraqis will come together is now insane. They're killing each other in the streets.
Well, now we are moving into the substance of the Iraq issue.
Do you want to do that? I'm happy to do that.
You happy to do that? I would like to do kind of the whole Middle East. I want to, you know, in our household we have these educational placemats, and Lisa just bought us a new set of them, and she gave me the Middle East placemat, and here it is. You can see if you look. Well, can you see? It says Read-A-Mat, Eat and Learn. Maybe now that I've shown the brand name there, I'll get the occasional free placemat, if you know what I'm saying. But anyway, here's the Middle East, and if you look at the stretch of turf from, that would be Afghanistan, I think, to Israel, that's a very large stretch of turf. And then there's Iraq. And in several places here, things are going very badly. From Israel to Afghanistan, and certainly including Iraq, I would say the news has been for the worse lately. And you can imagine things going, you know, they're just coming to have a certain unity to it regionally. You can, I mean, there's already a certain kind of connection among events. Certainly the jihadists try to link events in Israel to events in Iraq and try to make anything that looks like an atrocity attributable to an American Zionist conspiracy. And I think they have some success on that front, publicity-wise.
Isn't that go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just saying. Let me just quickly say.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you can among the things you can imagine are this blowing up into is, for example, a war between Iran and some Sunni states that becomes huge and regional. In any event, I think one could argue that. I've been known to argue that if you look in these three places, Israel, Iraq, and Afghanistan, the Bush administration is at least partly, not entirely, responsible for the way things have gone downhill.
Well, look, it seems to me it's very hard to blame when Sadr's people, or people who seem to be a subset of Sadr's Shiite people, pull people off the street and shoot them just because they're Sunnis. It's very hard to blame that on the United States.
I'm blaming the United States for A, the initial invasion, B, the horrible post-war planning.
But I don't think the anti-U.S. jihadists get much traction blaming sectarian killings of Sunnis on the United States. They're obviously not the United States is doing, and it seems to me that it's sort of Sadr is sort of discrediting himself. I mean, weren't you the one promoting the theory that Mir Rosen's theory that only Sadr could hold Iraq together? Well, that doesn't look too good today. I mean, his people are you know, certainly alienating the Sunnis. How's he going to hold the Sunnis together when he's killing them?
I'm not sure if I was making that case, but one thing I would agree with is that, in a certain sense, the direction of events in Iraq is working less to America's obvious disfavor in a short-term sense, because the killing is less directly attributable to the United States, because we're more and more, I think, kind of staying in the barracks, and more the killing is coming because of things other than American bombs and American guns. That's true, but I'm still just definitely not heartened
It's a humanitarian disaster, but I don't, but I don't understand where this Sunni opposition to the Shiite onslaught comes from. What Sunni state is stepping up to the plate and saying, stop Iran, stop Shiites? I don't see one. It seems to me the Sunnis lose.
Iran is stepping up to the plate now. You can imagine Saudi Arabia getting pretty insecure about the situation, partly because it has an appreciable Shiite population itself, so it can start worrying about borders getting redrawn.
Well, right, but if it goes to war with the Shiites, then it has to worry more about its Shiite population, not less.
Well, no, but what could start as border disputes with an Iran-dominated Iraq or an Iran-dominated Shiite part of Iraq could turn into a larger war. The border disputes could result from the insecurity of Saudi Arabia about the integrity of its borders in light of an Iran-dominated Iraq and a possibly expansionist. I don't know. Look, so far in this area, it's kind of like most of the things that could go wrong have. It seems to me. I'm very deeply worried.
No, what we were really worried about was the Sunnis and Shiites getting together to throw us out.
We were?
And say we embrace Al-Qaeda. They're not about to do that.
No, but you could well wind up with an Al-Qaeda-friendly mini-state in the Sunni area of Iraq, and one mini-state is kind of as good as the next. You could also wind up with that in Afghanistan again, well down the road. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but that's the direction in which things are moving.
Yeah, there's also some possibility for good things still.
There is, but the news has been very bad lately. And don't you have the feeling that this latest Iraq thing, where they were pulling people out of cars and I guess killed around 50 of them on the basis of their ethnicity? Don't you get the sense that that's a new threshold,
Well, it's a new threshold, except, a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Israel, I said, well, typically this will lead to an overreaction, and that's what the terrorists want, and I was ashamed of what a hacked comment that was.
No, it was true.
But seems to have been true in Israel, but I don't think it's necessarily true in Iraq. The violence stopped when the forces of the government, using some private militias, intervened. There's been a general sense of revulsion, and this is getting out of hand, and we better stop it. And we better come up with a better security plan, and it might provoke a good reaction as opposed to a bad reaction.
Well, actually, the day after that was, as reported in the Washington Post, was full of bloodshed in reaction to that day. What strikes me about it is it's a threshold in this sense. The ethnic cleansing so far has been kind of you can't live here if you're a Shiite, or you can't live here if you're a Sunni. This type of thing escalates it to you can't even drive through here if you're a Shiite or a Sunni.
Right.
And remember, kind of the definition of a civil war, one of the criteria is that you have large swaths of territory completely controlled by one ethnicity. That's when it starts to resemble more an actual war. That's a prerequisite for an actual full-fledged civil war. To the extent that you establish that you can't even pass through certain territory based on your ethnicity, that's another step toward that kind of territorial segregation and a truer civil war.
Although a peaceful territorial segregation doesn't look that bad at the moment.
No, but you see, what I'm worried about and suspecting is that we are now to the point where the next chance for stability will be after so much ethnic cleansing has been done that there is enough territorial homogeneity ethnically so that you can imagine a relatively simple multi-state solution or something. And that we're not very close to that yet, certainly not in Baghdad and in some other places. And I just worry that we've kind of stepped onto the slippery slope, and the next plateau will be that point, and there's going to be a lot of killing in between now and that point.
But if we could magically get to the plateau without killing, that wouldn't be that bad.
Well, no, but remember, the definition of the plateau is a whole lot of Shiites and a whole lot of Sunnis have relocated, and I don't know who's going to intervene and usher in a peaceful population transfer program.
No, I understand, but partition and relocation is just inherently not. It's not a good thing, but it's inherent. It's also the precondition for peace.
Well, as you know, I've been sympathetic to partition type solution for a long time.
But if you read Iraq the Model, it doesn't seem to be at that point. Nobody's going out on the streets. Everybody's terrified of these being checked and shot if you're a Sunni or shot if you're a Shiite. But the government is promising order, and at least attempting to impose order, and the onus is on them to come up with some plan that actually achieves order, and the leaders are backpedaling, saying, "Oh, we're not responsible for these death squads." So the public opinion of the vast majority of people is against them. I would say it's not quite, Spanish Civil War.
Maybe not. I would say elsewhere in that regional conflagration map in Israel, I do think there's the possibility of decisive intervention by a third party, namely us or including us. Steve Clemens' blog linked to this piece in the Financial Times by Gareth Evans and Robert Malley. Robert Malley, I think, was involved in the Camp David negotiations on the side of the United States, making the point that at this point, the dynamics are such that to resolve this particular crisis that's going on now with the Palestinians, it's going to take decisive intervention from a third party. And I think that's true, because left to their own devices, neither can afford to lose face in the way that they would if they initiated anything that moved toward resolution. I mean, I think at least it will be hard, and it would be much easier if one or both of the parties could blame somebody else like us for partly coercing them into whatever gestures were required.
And you would favor this?
Absolutely. I mean, I would favor more decisive and forceful American intervention in that issue than we've seen for a long time.
And is there any sign that the Bush administration is readying that?
I haven't seen. The Bush administration has been, to my mind, remarkably compliant with the wishes of the Israeli government. I mean, I thought that the bombing of that power station was just really ill-advised from everyone's point of view and disproportionate. But we didn't hear a peep from the Bush administration, and that's pretty much the way they play it. Some European nations finally have started complaining, and I saw one Cole report that the European Union had said something, but I don't see that validated anywhere else, so I'm not sure about that.
But I mean, we can't send our own troops. That's what we did in Lebanon. We stepped in.
I'm not talking about troops at this point. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that by intervention. I'm sorry. What I meant was, Israel being able to say, look, the U.S. saying something loudly and insistently that lets Israel say, look, left to our own devices, we would not withdraw from Gaza right now. But George Bush is being a pain about this. That's something that the Israelis understand better than they would understand a withdrawal initiated by the Israeli government, I think. That's the kind of thing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean troops at this point. In the long run, you can imagine troops. Tom Friedman used to push for NATO troops as part of a solution, but that was years ago.
Right. Okay, well, I don't argue with you there. I mean, any dispute would be a false dispute.
And we do not gin up false disputes on Blogging Heads TV.
That's right.
And we've been lauded for not doing that in
Business Week.
In Business Week.
Cool. So, on to topic 3.
Yeah, which is Bush fatigue.
Yeah, I mean, I've now talked to enough conservatives, and they've all been demoralized. And it's not just about Iraq. It's sort of the scales have fallen from their eyes about the whole Bush administration. And it's now late enough in his term that they're not mentally invested with defending him. So they can say things like, gee, it really was stupid to spend 7 minutes reading The Pet Goat instead of reacting on 9/11. That, our president, he did freeze under pressure, and that wasn't the right thing to do. And his staff maybe maybe people on his staff aren't first-raters. Maybe they're second-raters. People are freer to say that, whereas before, 4 years ago, they wouldn't permit themselves to say that because Bush was their guy. Now Bush isn't their guy. We also have people who are leaving the administration, have left the administration, like Powell, sort of turning back and sniping at the people who are still there.
Well, Powell had issues long ago, anyway.
Well, a lot of them have issues.
Yeah, but he was kicked out of the administration.
I don't know. I've just been shocked at the extent of demoralization. I mean, I have to buck them up on Iraq. I mean, they're more demoralized than I am. And I wasn't for the war.
Yeah.
It seems. I just think it's sort of a phenomenon, and a bizarre phenomenon, and the underlying thing is that Bush is just a stubborn guy. I mean, he had this game plan coming into the administration. He was going to do, tax cuts, Social Security, immigration, and he's done tax cuts, Social Security, immigration, and invading Iraq. And Social Security was a loser, and immigration is going to be a loser, and yet he's sort of plowing ahead stubbornly. Now, in Iraq, the stubbornness is going to help him, but domestically, it's not.
Well, what about? I thought he had sent signals of a willingness to compromise on immigration. Or those reports?
Well, that's all totally phony. I mean, he sent signals that he's willing to put more troops on the border, and that he's willing to he's willing to stagger the dates so we allegedly have the enforcement before we have the semi-amnesty. He hasn't made a real concession, certainly not an about face, and. It's harder to get away with the standard Bush scams in the internet era. I mean, he says we're going to send so many troops to the border, and people notice that half of them haven't showed up.
Yeah.
So I don't. I think he's still totally full speed ahead on. In Social Security, he caved. That he made a concession too. He said, well, we can embrace this Posen plan, or we can He too little, too late. He tried to come up with half a loaf, and this is sort of very similar to that. And John Alter's point is FDR would have changed course. FDR would have said, "This isn't working. Let's try something else." FDR would have embraced Mitt Romney's proposals for health care, get something new on the table. And Bush hadn't done it.
Well, as for these conservatives who feel Bush fatigue, I just want you to know I share their pain, because my case of Bush fatigue began in late January of 2000. And to some extent, actually, I think the initial liberal critique of Bush, which took shape even before he was elected, is consistent with the current conservative critique and may help illuminate the problem they're having with him. And that critique was, this guy clearly is not all that smart. He's not all that curious about the world. Those just aren't the ingredients for a great president. And certainly some of the things that conservatives complain about can be attributable to those things. I assume some of them are complaining about the poor post-war planning in Iraq, and there I think you get to the fact, the guy didn't know much about the world. He's not that curious. He didn't ask the right questions. You just cannot imagine a Bill Clinton, a Jimmy Carter, a Richard Nixon, various pretty smart, pretty curious presidents, being that laissez-faire about a situation.
That's not true. Clinton was exactly that laissez-faire about Somalia. He let a guy in running our policy who tilted against IDs stupidly, and the whole war went all to hell because he wasn't paying attention.
Well, first of all, that was not
Clinton's
nearly
big military intervention, and he screwed it up.
That was not nearly on the scale of the. First of all, I'm not sure I would buy that. I don't know enough about the facts to say whether I agree with you. But in any event, that's not nearly on the scale of a 140,000 person invasion of a clearly in a clearly volatile region.
It was the biggest thing on Clinton's plate at the time, militarily.
Yeah, but it was also closer to being a legacy of a previous administration than Bush's invasion of Iraq was, I would say. Well, you could maybe argue that, but
that's probably true. But it was early in his term. Maybe he learned his lesson by the end of his term.
Yeah, the comparable thing was actually the Bay of Pigs, where that was a legacy of the Eisenhower administration to some extent. But anyway.
What about the pharmaceutical factory in the Sudan? That was Clinton's fine attention to detail.
Well, that was not much planned at all. That took shape, I don't defend that. But I still say I can't imagine, or just take Katrina, that famous video where they say, where they get up and they're doing this teleconference and the guy says to Bush, this is like the biggest thing since, whatever, this is going to be an epic disaster. And Bush says, okay, thanks, I got to, asks not a single question. I can't imagine any of the presidents I mentioned, doing that.
I agree that there's a harmonic convergence of left-wing critiques of Bush and right-wing critiques of Bush.
Maybe this will lead to some sort of healing between left and right.
I'm not so sure, but...
Me either.
It may lead to productive dialogue. I think everybody agrees we want a government that works. We don't want a government that lets people
That
starve
would
to
be a
death
good
in New
platform,
Orleans.
Mickey. You could run for office. A government that works.
That's a good idea. Didn't Michael Dukakis try that? I think he did.
You put a little too much emphasis on sheer competence, I would say.
Anyway, I just was struck by that, so I wanted to bring it up.
There you go. Well, anyway, we may see healing between left and right, and you and I may lead the way. This has been a noticeably, certainly non-conflictual Blogging Heads TV so far, wouldn't you say?
Well, but people sense the underlying tension.
Yeah, plus
And
we're headed into terrain where we clearly disagree.
And they know we're headed for a big confrontation, yeah. So
Should we move into
let
it
her
now?
rip. Let her rip, yeah, sure.
Okay, well, we've gotten a certain amount of email begging us to shut up about Ann Coulter. And I share their pain.
So do I.
But you took advantage when you did your little monovlog and seized control of our production facilities during my absence. You had to turn this into a topic and do a little Ann Coulter segment, right?
Yeah.
You raised an issue to which I feel compelled to respond.
Go ahead.
It's a very high-minded thing. I think this may not degenerate into a shouting match, but tell me if I have your argument right. I only listened to it once.
Okay.
But here's what I think you said. First of all, I think the subtext of that really was to actually somewhat disassociate yourself from Ann Coulter. One thing was you stressed that there's a whole lot of things you don't disagree with her on.
Right.
And I would say that I think it's tactically wise of you to start moving away from a sinking ship.
I said there's a whole lot of things I don't agree with her on.
Don't agree with her on.
Yeah, okay.
Is that not what I said?
You said disagree, I think. But anyway,
Okay.
maybe I'm wrong.
I stand corrected. So that's that. But your argument, your response to me was, you said, here's my problem with Bob. He wants to stigmatize, more specifically, he wants Mickey to stigmatize Ann Coulter, wants her to be socially ostracized on the basis of some things she says, which is true. I think, moral sanction is an important part of the texture of any culture. Not government censorship, moral sanction. And you said, and you accepted the principle that sometimes this should happen in a healthy culture. Sometimes there should be stigma attached with certain things.
Sure.
But as you put it, you didn't agree that we should expand the circle of things that are stigmatizable as large to the size that I wanted to expand it to, right?
Correct. That's a very fair statement of my argument.
Okay. The disagreement between us is, I'm arguing that it doesn't, what I'm asking for does not constitute an expansion of the circle, and you are saying it does. Because I'm saying...
Well, I'm just saying I want a bigger circle than you.
You're saying you want a smaller circle than me.
No, I want I want a smaller circle of condemnation and a bigger circle of speech and debate and willingness to say outrageous things and be challenged on them.
Okay, but as for the circle encompassing stigmatizable speech, you want that to be small.
Yes.
Okay. My argument is that what I'm asking for in the case of Ann Coulter does not constitute an expansion of the circle. You accept that people should be I think you accept that it's legit to stigmatize people for ethnic slurs directed toward blacks and Jews, and I'm saying that we should also stigmatize people for ethnic slurs directed toward Muslims, and that's it. To me, that doesn't seem to be
Well, it depends how bad the ethnic slur is, Bob, and then we get into that whole debate.
Well, we do, but I just wanted to isolate the issue. I'm not conceding that I am arguing for an expansion of the circle. And
should Edward Banfield have been banned when he said the riots of the 60s were mainly for fun and profit? He was a neocon social theorist. He said it wasn't really about racism. People were really in it for fun and profit. Should he have been banned? That's basically what Ann Coulter said about Muslims.
No.
Should he have been chased from the public sphere, or should we have argued with him and refuted him? I think we should have argued with him. He shouldn't have been banned, and that was a live issue. I mean, he was chased around campus and basically chased out of Harvard for saying that.
Two things. First of all, the statement that I think you're comparing to that statement, the statement of Ann Coulter's that I think you're comparing to, is the statement saying that it is the default condition of Muslims to riot.
But she was obviously making she was making a hyperbolic, humorous statement, basically saying these people just like to riot, and that's exactly what Banfield said about.
So wait, you're saying we should
city.
not take what she says literally. The literal meaning of her statements are not really what they mean.
Sometimes people, Bob, argue by exaggeration.
No, I'm just trying to isolate.
I hate to break the news to you, but you want to go to the underlying thrust of her comment, which I think is bad enough from your point of view. I think you still want to ban her for it, but she didn't say that every Muslim everywhere in the world wants to riot.
No, Mickey, that's where I think you're really understanding the meaning of her sentence. I mean, I'll maybe just write it out in an afterthought so that people can read it. She actually, when she says the default condition of Muslims is to do X, it is in fact the generalization she's making about all Muslims and not making about other groups, and that's why it's a bigoted statement, Mickey.
No, she's saying that in the current historic circumstances, the tendency of Muslims is to like to riot, and that's an argument one has to deal with.
Mickey, her sentence not only isn't saying that, it's saying the opposite of that. It's saying that the current historical circumstances are being used as an excuse to cover the fact that this is actually their natural state, to riot. Okay? That's...
I don't think that's what she was saying.
We just have a disagreement. Afterthought, and
I think she was making a
now, if you want to say she didn't say what she means, say that now, because I think when people read the sentence, it's going to be clear that I'm right about what the sentence ostensibly means.
No, because you have to look at it in context. She's saying if it's not if it's not the cartoons of Muhammad, it's going to be something else, and she's making an argument like that Bernard Lewis makes about how Muslims have this inferiority complex and they resent the fact that they've been passed over by history and the economy, and they have a natural tendency to want to strike back at the forces of the infidel because they have this complex. That's where she's coming from. And she's not saying that racially, ethnically, genetically they're prone to riot. She's saying in the large historical circumstances of the 21st century, there is this tendency to be anti-American for whatever reason happens to be handy.
No, it's exactly the opposite. She's divorcing the behavior from... She is not explaining it in terms of contemporary circumstance and saying that the contemporary circumstance is just being used as an excuse. But we'll let people read the sentence. Anyway, let me get to the other thing she said, which is just to use an ethnic slur, the R word, I'll call it, because I really think we shouldn't throw the word around any more than we should throw the N-word around. And I think that's exactly comparable to the N-word. And anyway, my argument is it's not expanding the circle.
We've had this argument, Bob. It's like calling Germans krauts because they eat sauerkraut. You call Arabs ragheads because they wear rags on their heads. It's the same sort of slur. It's a slur. She shouldn't have said it, but it's not like saying that somebody is innately inferior or different.
Well, wait a second.
You're ridiculing an item. So you're ridiculing an item of clothing, Bob, not their innate nature.
Wait, it is an ethnic slur, you're saying?
It's a milder degree of ethnic slur. It's like saying that Germans are krauts, and I think you shouldn't call Germans krauts, but a whole lot of people did it without being chased out of the public sphere.
They did it during World War II. If they did it now, they would have trouble, getting invited to a lot of parties.
Well, but you wouldn't be fulminating against them.
That's a separate question, Mickey. If you're saying it's comparable to that, that is an ethnic slur that's now considered unacceptable. All I'm saying is ethnic slurs that are considered if ethnic slurs are considered unacceptable with one ethnicity, it should be another one. That's why I'm not asking for the circle to be expanded.
You're stretching the definition of what ethnic slur is to, in a PC way, narrow the debate, and I say it's much better to be looser. I think you should allow ethnic slurs against mild ethnic slurs against all sorts of people. It's better to have it out honestly.
So what's the one you should allow with blacks? What is the one we should be throwing around with blacks?
I don't know. Dashiki wearing something or other, or I don't know. I don't know what I can't think of what the equivalent is among blacks.
Anyway, I mean, earlier you said this ethnic slur she's using doesn't say anything about genetic inferiority. Well, neither does the N-word explicitly, or even necessarily connotatively. It's just a slur. And there was a time when it wasn't such a slur.
Bob, Bob, you have to look at the history of it. The history is entirely as a genetic. This is an inferior race. We don't want them intermarrying with our women. The whole basis of the N-word is a genetic,
have you really looked
offensive,
into it,
racist argument.
You really know? Have you looked into it?
I read Nick Lemon's book.
Well, doesn't it? I mean, if you go to the very beginning of it, isn't it just the way that people who are somewhat bigoted happen to pronounce the word Negro?
I actually don't know. There is a book that's been written about it.
Well, in any event, I'd say that right now, people who are bigoted toward Muslims do use the word she used.
Well,
and there's other evidence that she's one of these people, independent of this use.
People who are bigoted Muslims use a whole lot of words. That doesn't mean every word they use is itself racist. Well, people who are bigoted supported welfare reform. That doesn't mean welfare reform was bad.
My point is that it doesn't make any sense to look at this word and say it's not strictly comparable in every connotation to a word that is now widely and officially accepted to be an ethnic slur, because there was a time when people were making the argument I'm making about the N-word was that should not be acceptable. Okay, when I was a kid, I used to hear people make it in places where you would not hear it now. People use the N-word in Texas where you would not hear the word used now. So there was a formation of the consensus that should be stigmatized.
Well, this is the standard liberal argument that because we were right in the civil rights movement that the circle should get incredibly, incredibly tighter and tighter and tighter, and that you're always right in the future. No, you're making a strained, technical argument that here's a word. It's maybe comparable to Schwarze. Okay, Mayor Dinkins. Not Mayor Dinkins. Giuliani got into a lot of hot water because Jackie Mason called Mayor Dinkins a Schwarze.
What does it mean?
It means black, but it's a Yiddish word, and it has a slight tinge in some contexts of opprobrium, in some contexts others. But it's probably not a word he should use. But it's not as bad as nigger.
Okay.
So that would be an analogy. I don't think people who say the word Schwarze should be chased from the public square.
I would say if people started using it with any frequency and it was understood to have negative connotations, it should be chased from the public square because that's the way we deal with ethnic slurs. And the word she used is clearly understood. It's always used with hostile intent.
I don't
Mickey.
think anything with...
Who uses that without... Mickey, find
chase...
me a neutral usage of the R word. Go find me one that's not meant with hostile intent.
No. It has a negative connotation. I just disagree. I don't think anything with a negative connotation should be chased from the public square. You've written a book that says all cultures aren't alike. So, and you don't say one is better than another, but should anybody who says one culture is better than another be chased from the public square? No. Once you accept that cultures are different, you open the door to saying some cultures are better than others. So you can say that the culture of people who wear turbans is worse than the culture of people who don't wear turbans. Yes, it's negative, but no, it's not. You're not saying that they're innately wrong. If they stopped wearing the turbans and adopted a different culture, they would presumably, you wouldn't say that they're innately inferior. You should be able to make that argument. You should be able to say the culture of primitive Indians is worse than the sophisticated culture of Western Europeans. I wouldn't necessarily make that, but you shouldn't be chased out of the chased into the shadows just because you say that.
Mickey, the test of whether a slur is unacceptable can't be just whether it attributes innateness to some negative property. Because I think Judaism is a religion that accepts converts, but I think you'd agree that anti-Semitic slurs are unacceptable. So, and I mean, because it accepts converts, in other words, people of all races, you can't attribute anything genetic to something that all Jews are.
Well, it's partly genetic. There's a whole business about, was your mother Jewish, et cetera, et cetera. So it is partly tribal and genetic. And one of the reasons they don't proselytize is because they're willing to accept converts, but they in fact do have I'm getting in a deep water here, but
I think I'll leave you alone.
They don't have a universalist conception where they want the whole world to adopt their view. I don't think. But you're the one writing a book about that, so I'll defer that to you.
And I'll defer that to when the book is done, which will happen sooner if we quit talking about that evil. Never mind.
Okay. Well, we've kept it admirably abstract and.
Yeah, and the only point I'm making is that we don't agree that I'm asking for the circle to be expanded. The argument is about whether it's an expansion of the circle.
Well, that's the same thing.
No.
I'm saying you're expanding the circle by stretching the definition, and you're saying yes, we don't agree in the principle that the circle should be expanded. Fair enough.
Well, we don't even agree that I'm arguing for
You're
the
saying
principle.
you're not
We do
expanding
agree that the circle shouldn't be expanded.
Yes.
We don't agree that I'm arguing that it should be.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm glad we got that straightened out.
By the way, you're a PC commissar.
Thank you.
That's a slur.
Oh. Well,
Anyway.
as long as it's a group of one that the slur is directed toward, it's totally acceptable. I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, Mickey. Should we move to viewer email?
Yeah.
It's from James M. You two guys look and sound like the odd couple. You guys are like the actual Felix and Oscar, Tony Randall and Jack Klugman. If you want to make this fact into some sort of publicity driver, I'd have Bob tidy up his bookshelf and have Mickey add some background clutter. Your ratings would go through the roof.
I got plenty of black background clutter.
I'm actually not sure that would be a big ratings driver. I question the premise that it is so darn obvious that I'm Felix and you're Oscar. Do you think it's obvious? Do you think that's clearly true?
I would say if we took a poll, it would be 80-20, me being Oscar, yes.
Really? You would not... Well, I don't want to discuss this too much because I actually would like viewer input. But if you're saying that you are in a whole lot of respects the less fastidious of the two of us, I would take issue with that. And I won't elaborate, but if viewers want to write in about who is more like Oscar and who is more like Felix and why, then eventually, if you and I can agree on who gets closer to the truth...
I'm pretty unfastidious.
Or, Mickey, if we each make a choice as to which viewer is closer to the truth, in either event, the winner will get an autographed copy of your book, The End of Equality. Postage paid by you.
What is the... what? Who do I send this book to?
Whatever viewer writes in with an opinion as to which of us is which, A, and B, a substantiation of that claim that is convincing to one or both of us. Either, if enough of these things come in, either you and I will agree on who got it the rightest, and I'm starting to suspect that we won't agree, or we'll each pick our favorite. In either event, the lucky winner will get a copy of your book autograph sent to them, postage paid by you, plus the foot massage that you always give along with...
Well, they have to include their address in the email then. Their snail mail address.
Yeah, or we could, yeah. Or you could email them back and say you're the lucky winner.
But I'm so Oscar-esque, I'll probably lose it.
Mickey, don't bias the judgment. I really take issue. I mean, we'll argue about this in the future, okay?
One of us ate on camera, Bob. Which one of us was that?
Oh, yeah, but that was
think it was me.
Transparent affectation, as you've admitted.
I think that was the Oscar-esque thing to do.
No.
Anyway, I don't want to be Oscar, but I think I am. But anyway, okay. Compared to you, anyway. Compared to all my other friends, I'm Felix.
Okay, here's one from Matthew B. The point of this email is to request a modification to your site interface. A schedule of upcoming appearances would be a welcome addition. For an avid viewer like myself, there are few things as depressing as calling up the site and being presented with content I've already consumed, and no inkling of when a fresh dialogue will be appearing. Well, Matthew, when it comes to having no inkling of when a fresh dialogue will be appearing, I want you to know I share your pain. Because that's a condition in which I frequently find myself. And I'm the person who tries to ensure that there will be a fresh dialogue. So, anyway, if we had nearly enough certainty about the future to post with any confidence, any kind of schedule, God knows we would be happy to. But I'm afraid that reality, until more venture capital rolls in, reality does not permit that. And the upside of your coming to the site and being presented with content I've already consumed is that it does add to our page view statistics, which in turn could bring in venture capital, which in turn could alleviate the situation you complain about.
One of the lessons of the web is that it doesn't add to the stats as much as it subtracts. If you're regularly scheduled, you get more hits than if you're irregular and people are checking to see if you show up yet. I had this crazy idea when I started my blog that I was going to post irregularly so people would have to check constantly. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, he's right, but, we post no dialogue before it's time. We don't hew to an arbitrary schedule where we have to talk before we're even half-cocked.
No.
We go off only when we are fully half-cocked.
Yeah. I mean, we're off the grid. We're just off the grid. We reject convention in so many respects. Okay. A number of anti-Bob emails. This Robert E. writes, I do have to chime in with the increasing chorus out there. Bob can be a real jerk sometime, but Mickey, with his moose, really knows how to keep things under control. Mickey, is there a growing chorus out there that I can be a real jerk? I mean, A, is there one in our email? And B, if there is, how did this guy find out about it?
I would say there was one, but it's diminished because I've had to defend Ann Coulter, and so that's some people think I'm a jerk too.
Well, here's a complaint about me that actually has been repeatedly expressed. Robert Wright and Mickey Kaus are about equally smart and interesting, but it seems that Robert always dominates the conversation. I think there should be more of an effort to keep the share of time at 50-50. Fair is fair.
Hear, hear.
That actually is a theme, and I don't know why. I mean,
it's like if you read a transcript of Blogging Heads, it would be like the Charlie Rose show. There'd be a huge paragraph of Charlie Rose, and then a one-word answer, and then another huge paragraph of Charlie Rose and a one-word answer. And you are Charlie Rose.
How far would you carry the Charlie Rose comparison here? I mean, in terms of the quality of my verbiage and the motivation for it, and
you're superior in every. I'm only talking about the volume.
We did get another. Somebody was complaining about my name dropping, and that. I mean, not that would be a parallel with Charlie Rose, but that just sprung to mind.
Well, so you're parallel in many respects. Do you have a summer house in Soho? I don't think so.
Didn't know that. But after the venture capital comes in, I will. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's true that, but like today, I don't think I've consumed more than 50% of the airtime. Do you?
No, today's been more equally balanced.
Goodmunder K. Although, I don't know how many Goodmunder Ks there are in the world, so I'm not sure we're concealing an identity very successfully here, says to me, judging by your last discussion with Mickey, you need to meditate 3 times a day at least. That's in response to my having said that I was ratcheting up the meditation to 2 times a day. Thank you, Goodmunder. And then a related one from Jim O., who noted, after I said I went on a retreat, he asks, like the kind of retreats they made me go on when I was in Catholic school, please ask Mr. Meaning of Life to elaborate. What does he contemplate while on them? Some of us really want to know. Cordially, Jim O. Well, actually, as I think I said, that was one of those like corporate-type retreats or institutional-type retreats, which are the opposite of contemplative, which leave you in need of a contemplative retreat. But, as it happens, I did once go on a week-long silent meditation retreat, Mickey, and if I thought there were a lot of Jim O's out there who cared about this kind of stuff, I would talk about that aspect of my life. But, I'm just not sure we've been cultivating that kind of audience.
Don't you have a site called Meaning of Life TV where you do talk about that sort of stuff?
I do, but we have not been refreshing the content there with the frequency we'd like to. Besides, there I interview luminaries, and so don't go on and on as I do on this site about my own little self.
Well, I would be interested in knowing how close to the Godhead you got it during your retreat, but
that's a lie.
Okay.
You're humoring me. You're trying to lure me into making a fool of myself.
That too.
But the answer is really, really close.
Then maybe you shouldn't tell us. Okay.
Now, should I read one more email, or are we out of time?
One more. We're at 53 minutes.
Okay.
So
Another, critical of Bob, from the reliably critical of Bob, Tyler R. Mr. Wright, this is substantive. Mr. Wright never seems to address any of the pathologies that are omnipresent in the Muslim world, except when he can attribute responsibility for them to the United States. Enough with a condescending white Western first world guilt trip. Stop treating Arabs and Muslims like little children that need your help and protection. Start treating them like responsible adults and hold them accountable for the things they say and do in the name of Islam. Not everything wrong in the world, particularly in the Middle East, is America's fault. I actually do want to say that, the reason I harp on the role of America and its allies in these various pathologies and what America and its allies might do to alleviate them It's just that, I'm an American taxpayer. That's the policy levers, that I am capable of influencing, at least in theory. I mean, I could spend my time saying to radical Muslims, I don't approve of suicide bombing, but I just don't think I have much street cred with those people. I don't, I think, and that is really what's responsible for the asymmetry. That's partly responsible. It's not the only thing, but for the seeming asymmetry in the way I address these issues is just the fact that ultimately the thing I naturally think about changing is the policy of America, since that's the most I could hope to influence, and even that may be grandiose to think I could influence that. So there, Mickey.
I don't quite believe that, but...
You don't? What do you think?
No, I think you spend too much time hanging around the faculty lounge.
Faculty lounge?
So you naturally tend to... where critiques of America are very popular and critiques of the other are frowned on.
Well, I also... No, there's a somewhat separate issue, which is that people in general have trouble seeing things from a point of view other than their own. Certainly the radical Muslims are not at all good at seeing the world from our point of view. But again, I don't think my lecturing them is going to change that. And it's also true that I think Americans are not very good. I mean, people in general. But Americans are a little notorious for this. I'm not sure if that's deserved, but people in general are not that good at seeing things from the point of view of others. And yet, it is strategically in their interest to see things from the point of view of whoever's behavior they're trying to influence. So yeah, I spend more time elaborating on the point of view of Muslims and Muslim radicals in an attempt to try to explain why they do what they do, not in an attempt to excuse it, but just so that we could better influence it.
Fair enough.
You just want to get me off the air, don't you?
No, I don't want to start a whole argument over whether you have affection for terrorists.
Good thinking.
Which I don't think. But
you like somebody. You like somebody who does think that.
I do think it's not just that you're an American, so you want to affect Americans. I think you
have
a tendency, as many people do, to bend over backwards to understand the other.
Precisely because we are not naturally good at that. Precisely because then most Americans don't. To them, it's just like aliens from another planet. When they hear that people hate America, I mean, a whole lot of Americans just think, where did that come from? Well, it's actually comprehensible. They're human beings like us. Their behavior has causes like ours. Their cognition and emotions results from influences in the real world. It's in principle intelligible. Why is that such a radical position?
Fair enough. I'm for all forms of self-hatred.
That's a joke so obscure that I think only you and I are really enjoying it at this moment, Mickey.
That's not true. I think a lot of people understand that. But
feel free to elaborate. But no, let's leave an inside joke.
Okay.
But anyway, Oscar and Felix emails, we encourage.
Okay, and remember who's who.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
It's been real.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.